Welcome to the Adoption and Foster Care Journey, a podcast to encourage, educate, and equip you to care for children and youth through adoption, foster, and kinship care. Hosted by an adoptive mom with over 22 years of kinship and adoptive parenting experience. She's on this journey with you. Please welcome Sandra Flach.
While they were eating, Jesus took bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and gave it to his disciples, saying, "Take and eat. This is my body." That is Matthew 26:26. I am your host, Sandra Flach. Welcome to the Adoption and Foster Care Journey, where you will find encouragement and community for your parenting journey. I am a mom of 8 myself, 5 through adoption, including 2 young adults diagnosed with fetal alcohol syndrome. So I understand the challenges involved in raising children with trauma and prenatal substance exposure. So you are not alone here. I am walking this journey with you and want to make sure that this podcast really is everything that you need it to be for your parenting, because this is a long road and it can be a hard road, but it is also filled with joy and hope. And we are here to bring that to you. As well as resources that help you for your journey. So just a reminder, my new devotional book, Soul Care Saturday, 52 Devotions for Foster and Adoptive Moms, is now available on Amazon. This Devo is perfect for us busy moms. You'll find 52 devotions, one a week. Sometimes we don't get to, it's a little bit tricky to do one every single day, or if you have a devotional book that's 365, I know sometimes I fall behind and then I don't pick it back up because I don't like that feeling of falling behind. But this one a week, but there's enough meat each week for you to chew on if you want to go a little bit deeper. There's scriptures, breath prayers, journaling pages, and it is filled with beautiful illustrations, all designed to minister to your heart and refresh your spirit. So I hope that you will grab a copy on Amazon today. And please follow and like the Adoption and Foster Care Journey on our Instagram and Facebook pages. We are on Instagram at AFC_journey and on Facebook at the Adoption and Foster Care Journey. So we're pretty easy to find, and I look forward to connecting with you there as well as in person. I just came back from Mobilize, Ohio, where we had an incredible time. That's such a great conference. And my next spring conference is the Renew Retreat in Swansboro, North Carolina. And that is on April 30th through May 2nd. I'm actually driving there with a good friend of mine who's a fellow adoptive mom as well. So I'm going to be there, going to do breakout session, have an exhibitor booth with lots of resources and information. My books will be available. So I hope that you can get out to this retreat. Renew is wonderful for both parents, for moms and dads together. There's great content, but there's also a lot of pampering of parents, a lot of opportunities for rest and rejuvenation as well. So I hope you'll check it out. There is a link in the show notes. You can still register for the Renew Retreat in North Carolina. And then I'll be posting after that some of my fall dates. But I am also booking still, if you are interested in having me come to speak to your group, to lead an FASD training, or if you're doing a foster adoptive parent or mom retreat, even if you want, whether it's in person, I even do schedule online. So please reach out to me if you're looking to have me come or do something online. My email address is in the show notes as well. It's super easy. It's Sandra Flach at justicefororphans.ny.org. But there's a link in there if you don't remember that. And reach out to me. I answer my own email, so I'll get back to you if you're interested in having me come or to schedule something. I love, love, love to do that. So today we have a guest with us. We have Abby Mortenson. Abby is an adoptive and foster mom, a social worker, and an integrative somatic trauma therapist in training who supports women and mothers through embodied, trauma-informed, and community-centered healing spaces. Rooted in faith and lived experience, Her work focuses on nervous system care, grief and joy integration, and fostering meaningful connection, especially for foster and adoptive moms. So please welcome Abby Mortenson. Hey, Abby, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you so much for having me.
I'm super excited to have you here. I know you're a fellow New Yorker.
Yes.
Right now, I don't always get to interview folks in my state. I know you're downstate more in the Hudson Valley, the lower Hudson Valley region, but still fun to connect and love for my listeners to get to know you a little bit better. And I always like to start with, how it all started for you. So, what led you and your husband to pursue foster care and adoption?
Yeah. So of course, there's so many layers and it's a long story, but we we knew that we knew getting married that we most likely couldn't have children biologically. And it was interesting because I felt like I had a soft heart for adoption, since I was young. And I felt like God was just kind of giving me that opportunity to trust him with having a family eventually one day, whatever that might look like. And we were married for a while. We did some ministry together, worked with youth in foster care for a while back in Colorado. And once we got to the point of, hey, I think we're ready, let's start pursuing adoption, were faced with all the questions of where and how and
Mhm.
what was going to be ethical and what was going to be um, open for us to pursue. So we started with international adoption and we were in it for months and months and months, spent a lot of money, did all the paperwork, all those things, and then the program we were in fell through. And it was a big shock and a loss for us. We just were kind of left like, oh, well, that was a closed door. What do we do now? And continued to just ask God, for direction. We ended up meeting a woman in our town who someone connected us who was pregnant with twins. And so we started pursuing domestic adoption with this woman who really wanted to make a plan with us. So we got an agency involved. That was part of the law. I don't know if it's the law everywhere, but in Colorado, that was the law. So we did that. Kind of same thing. We were in it for months and months, paid a lot of money, asked for a lot of support from our family and friends, and ended up that we found out she had faked the whole pregnancy.
Oh my.
And yeah, it was another shock, obviously. We had met her, our friends had met her. She had a belly, she had sonograms, she had everything. And she even kind of tricked the agency. They didn't know. They thought there were babies coming as well. So that happened as a shock again and just like, okay, Lord, what is going on? We thought we were doing the right thing. We want to love children who need a home. A lot happened in those months afterwards, just kind of processing grief and like questioning and crying out to God a lot. And shortly after that happened, my mom died suddenly. And it was a very just difficult time for me, kind of processing that. It took a few years for me to even kind of come out of the cloud of grief. And that kind of stopped us for a little while pursuing pursuing growing our family. In the meantime, through that time, we ended up deciding, and I had thought about it quite a bit about fostering. We decided, you know what, we have a home, we really want to love kids. God has called us to love children, whatever that may look like. And so we decided to step into foster care. And we went in knowing that this may not lead to adoption, and that's okay. Like we really God had just put it on our hearts like you can love kids. You can love kids. You have a home. Open your heart. And so we started that process 10 years ago. We got our first placement in, well, it was two little boys, a 6 month old and a 2 year old. And it was like crazy to just go from like being a couple in a quiet home to welcoming a toddler and a baby, and lots of intensity going on in that moment. They only stayed for 5 days and then they went back to their parents. So it was like a dip in the water. And then from there, we fostered we had 4 different children in a year in Colorado. And they all ended up reunifying, at least for a time. And then, kind of out of the blue, God kind of picked us up and moved us here to New York. So my husband got a job out here. We moved out here, and that's where kind of our real story gets even bigger and more complex with foster care. Um, so yeah, that's how we started, and we've been doing it for 10 years. It's been, as you know, so life-changing, so hard, so good. Um, so humbling in so many
Mm.
ways. Yeah.
Yeah, what a challenging start. I can a little bit I can relate to, the agency thing falling through because when we did an international adoption and it was a Christian agency in another state, our pastor and his wife had used that agency, so we wanted to go with a tried and true, right? These are recommended. Um, and but what was happening was the lady who was in charge of this agency, her personal life began to unravel. She was a Christian woman, but things began to unravel and crazy things began to be happening. And then right before we were ready to travel to Ukraine and we were bringing 4 of our kids with us, um, she's like they stopped communicating with us. There was
Wow.
like no communication. And then so some, by the grace of God, I had an email of the people on the ground in Ukraine that worked for her. They worked for multiple agencies, but I had the contact. So I just began communicating with the facilitator that we were going to be meeting when we got there anyway. And he had a lot of reservations about this agency. And by the time we got home from Ukraine and I was there for 6 weeks, um, they were like belly up this agency, and
Wow.
then wanted money from us because they
Yeah.
wanted money for what we owed them for in country. And I'm like, no, that's not happening because we actually paid directly for all of the things that we needed in country because you were not calling us, like you were not responding. So understanding that that the stressors, but really your whole story, and then losing your mom. I've lost my mom as well, and just this past fall lost a 3-year-old grandchild. So grief is heavy and hard. So I can, feel your heart and your grief and your loss. Um, and to pick up on your story, you come to New York, and then you guys tell us about how you pursued foster care here. Tell us about that and how your kiddos came to your home.
Yeah, so we started the process again here, and it took a while. We were waiting and waiting, and I think something happened again. Like the person who was doing our home study or something just left, or something happened. Then we finally got connected with, someone else, and they got it going. And our first call here, it's funny because I was running some errands and I left my phone in the car. And I came back to my car like 10 missed calls from the worker, Dan. I was like, something's going on. I called, and so they couldn't get a hold of me. They called Dan, my husband, and they said, we have a baby who's 2 days old who needs a home right now. Like it's now. And so he couldn't get a hold of me, so he just said yes. And of course, I was super happy that he said yes because we had been waiting, and we were excited to welcome a newborn. So the first yes, my husband did, and we had 2 hours to get ready, and we did not have any baby stuff here. We had nothing. We kind of pulled our community, our church, our family, and said, who has a crib, who has this, and I ran to get some formula, and um, so he came to us, and then 6 months later, no, 5 months later, I got a call, and my husband had the flu. He was like really sick in bed for days, and I got a call for a baby girl who was 2 days old, and she was actually she had just been born, and she was gonna be released the next day, and they needed a home, and I just said yes without even asking him. I'm like, I'm gonna get it. And that was a little crazy because we had a 5 month old at the time. But I was just like, yes, I knew in my heart it's a yes. And then I walked in to tell him, I'm like, I have a surprise for you. And the way he tells the story is that he thought I had like a cure for his flu because he was feeling so bad. And I said, we're getting a baby girl tomorrow. And like, his first reaction was like, he was mad. Like, he was not happy with that decision. Why didn't you ask me? But then we joke because she and him became super close. Like, she preferred dad for a long time. Um, and then a year later, we got another call for a newborn. So we were just like the baby house, we were like the home they called for the babies. And um, that was the first call was 7 years ago, and we still have those babies. So those three we adopted in the last few years. It took a while for some of them. The cases were long, and things go on. But those, and then we got another call 2 years after that for a sibling. So I have a sibling group of three that all came to us from the hospital. And then in between, we've fostered temporarily as well. Like, we've had some placements in between, and just recently we had to say goodbye to our 2 year old. So the talking about grief and heaviness of that. He came to us from the hospital. We raised him. We were super close. Like, we just had a special bond. And he reunified with his family, and they're doing really well. And so the situation, it's one of those things I always feared as a foster parent. Like, what if I have to say goodbye to someone I raised for so long? And
Mhm.
I didn't really want that to be my story because I knew the heartbreak. I knew how that I could imagine how that would feel. And it is part of our story now. And I'm in the rawness of it
Yeah.
as of today. We just said goodbye to him a week and a half ago.
Yeah.
So,
Mm.
yeah.
Did you have were you able to build a relationship with his birth family all along?
Yes. And that I think is so important and valuable. And it's something God has really taught me through this process. I've also worked um, in foster care. So I was a home finder for a little while, and I would teach the classes. And I also run support groups for foster parents. So one of the things in the new training, I don't know if all the parents listening are doing NTDC yet, but we were doing NTDC, which is the new training here in New York. And there's a lot about, like, keeping communication with birth families and how important that is for the children. And so when we said yes to this baby, this most recent baby, we almost didn't because it was like we were already in over our heads, it felt like, with four kids and lots of needs going on. But we both felt the nudge to say yes. And I also felt like God was pressing on my heart that this story is not just about this baby. Like, it's not just about him, it's also about his parents. And I'm calling you to love them too.
Mm.
And and so I really took that seriously, and I did my best to reach out to them, to to be there for them, and to talk with them, and to share with them. So we established a really good relationship, and I'm so thankful for that.
Mm.
Because now um, we do have, sorry, I don't know if you can hear that on my phone, but we do have communication with them still. And the plan is that we are going to continue to be in his life and them in ours. Like, it's almost like an extended family. And it's truly amazing. And I think that can be such a gift in foster care if that's an option.
Yeah. Yeah, looking at it as a ministry to not just the child, but to the parents, the birth parents as well, because sometimes, it does go in that direction of reunification, which is we know is the goal really of foster care. And sometimes there's termination of parental rights and there's an opportunity to adopt, but then sometimes it does become reunification, which we said is the goal. And, what's best for the child, right? If this child now has, you and your husband and birth parents in his life, that's really a big win for him, right? As he grows. So, but I know you're in the raw, those raw, because it's so fresh and the heartbreak is so fresh because you still experienced a loss. And I know that is so, so hard. Um, so you and your husband have four that you've
Mhm.
adopted, right?
Yes.
How old are they now?
They are 7, 7, 6, and 3.
Wow. So four under seven and under.
Yeah.
So I know life must be pretty crazy and busy.
Yeah. I mean, for a time we had 4 under 5, because they're so close in age. So I feel like now it's getting, I love 7-year-olds. They're just,
Yeah.
it's great. I'm like, oh, you can get yourself dressed now. I'm not changing, 4 people's diapers at the same time. So it's great.
That was great. That's so good. But we know even when kiddos come as babies, in foster care and adoptive placements, they've experienced some level of loss and trauma, even, especially in utero.
Yeah.
So, signs moving forward, we see symptoms and signs of that. What has been your experience? Anything that you're seeing? I know they're all still quite young.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, there's so much, and I think there is that myth out there that if you adopt a baby, you're good to go. It's all going to be easy, and that we all know, those of us who've experienced it, that there's a lot of unknowns, and as they grow, maybe more can be revealed, right, of what they're able to do, what they're capable of. We do struggle. We have a few kids who struggle with behaviors. There's ADHD, there's some genetic disorders that can come with behaviors, and there's some other things like just as I'm exploring and learning and trying to understand my kids, is there FASD going on? All these layers. And then there's even, one of my kids, we have connections with the birth families except for one of my kids, and her mom passed away. And so, and her dad is not really, we're trying to connect with him right now, but we don't have an open connection yet. She hasn't met him since she was a baby. And so, even that for her, like the loss is very real, and she brings it up a lot, and she cries about her mom, and we cry together. And I'm very open with her about it. And I want her to feel like she can say, I miss my birth parents, or she'll say, sometimes I wish I could be with them, or um, I want to know my dad. I want to know my birth mom, and I can't, So there's those layers that are there too, that are always going to be with her. And another reason, to be open to the birth families and do whatever we can to find those connections. And I'm kind of in that process now with some of her relatives, just trying to connect because I know that would mean so much to her.
Yeah, because they don't forget. They're. I find it's always on their mind. I mean, four of my kids were adopted internationally, and we know, by the time the youngest one came to us, because we did like three, and then a few years later we found out about the younger one, and then he came home. But in the, between the two adoptions, birth mom had passed away. We found that out.
Mm.
And then like no idea where the birth father ever was. And now in Ukraine, there's this war and it's not even likely he's probably even alive. So they you know, sort of had that disconnect of, they saw life in the United States with this new family is really all they focused on. But we did do a kinship adoption first.
Yeah.
And so our daughter, her birth mom had passed away from cancer before she came to live with us. And but there was a dad out there somewhere. And, she just always thought of him, even though she had stability, she had family, she had all of these things. And he saw her when she was a newborn and then never again. So she'd never had a relationship with him, but she knew he was out there. And our kids don't ever forget that. I
Yeah.
know my parents divorced when I was like 5 years old and rarely saw my birth dad for several years and then, really didn't through out my adulthood. But it's like you have that memory and you do
Yeah.
it crosses your mind, something will happen and you'll think of it. So our kids, even if they come to us, and some adoptive families, they will, they're in the delivery room and they cut the cord, that doesn't mean that that child is never going to think about their birth family. So we need to be sensitive to that and to honor that. So I love that you are doing that with your kiddos, especially your daughter that you shared. You mentioned, some other diagnoses, and you mentioned FASD. That's something that I talk a lot about because my two youngest are both diagnosed with fetal alcohol syndrome, and a lot of the symptoms, most of the symptoms of FASD, very much are the same symptoms as trauma.
Yeah.
It can also look like autism sometimes. They all have an ADHD diagnosis, and really those big behaviors are the symptoms. So you mentioned any of that. Do you have any diagnoses of an FASD with any of your kiddos, suspected prenatal exposure?
I don't have any diagnoses yet, but we are moving forward with the University of Rochester. I believe
Yes.
they have that program that we're looking into, and we're kind of in the process of going to see them. Just it's nice to see or know that there are some people who understand it, some specialists, because I think, I mean, we go to some developmental pediatricians already, but it's not. I mean, the neurologist that I brought it up to was like, yeah, she obviously has ADHD, and if she does have an FASD, it doesn't really matter. The treatment's the same.
Yeah.
That's what he told me. I'm like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, yeah, maybe there are similar, ways that you treat it, but I think that having an understanding of what they're dealing with helps us so much. It can help teachers and the people who are working with them, one, to have more grace for the child, right? Because a lot of behaviors look like they're being defiant or look like we're terrible parents and we don't know how to rein our kids in or whatever. Like, we have those, I at least think about, what are people thinking of us because of these behaviors, and um, we have to understand, I think understanding that it's a brain thing,
Yeah.
it's not a choice, and that I feel like that can give us more grace and understanding and patience, and then for future, like if they do find an employer, and to be able to explain like this is what's going on with them, here's how we work with them, here's how we help them succeed, those things I think would be helpful to have.
Yeah, I always feel like, whatever the case, accurate diagnosis is very important.
Mhm.
And, and all of our kids do get an ADHD diagnosis typically, along with an FASD diagnosis, if you can get an FASD diagnosis, because it is very hard to get. Um, and it overlaps. I know a lot of families who've accepted an autism diagnosis because a lot of the symptoms are the same, but it's not autism. But they'll take it because that's how they get supports and services, right? And I don't begrudge them that at all,
Yeah.
because my boys, while they have the diagnosis, that in and of itself did not get us anything.
Yeah.
They got at school, they're both graduated or out of school now, but they had IEPs, and it said other health impaired because
Yeah.
FASD is not recognized, at the time. We're making great strides nationally to change that. But it's understanding that this is an invisible brain-based condition. It's a brain injury, essentially, that occurs in utero, and all of the symptoms are behavioral. So they're not gonna look like they have something necessarily. There's facial features associated with FAS, but most people wouldn't even recognize them. They're pretty subtle. My boys do have that, and most people don't really understand that, wouldn't pick up on that.
Yeah.
But it's those symptoms. Uh, it looks like bad behavior. It looks like willful defiance and disobedience and all of the things. And really, it's symptomatic of a brain that works differently and that has been harmed. So, education for everybody, and doctors don't necessarily, understand it. I've interviewed two doctors in New York State who specialize in FASD. One, Dr. Petrenko at the University of Rochester, and then Dr. Douglas Waite in the city, who's now retired. But they both basically said the same thing to me. It's not really taught in medical school. You might read a paragraph in a medical book, you might hear 5 minutes of it on a lecture, but it's just not talked about. And even still, there is so much misunderstanding. I've got adult children who I've got grandchildren, so I've got adult children who have babies, right? And they'll even say that their obstetrician, right? Is that the doctor? I don't know. Their doctor, it's been so long, I don't even know what they're called anymore, but some of among their friend group, it's like our doctor said that we could have a glass of wine to, because stress isn't good. And I'm like,
It's crazy.
no, so I just like they get the big lecture from me. They know because they know me, but they're telling me. I had a daughter who recently had a baby in January, and I know when she first got pregnant, she was, like, I can't have sushi because you can't have raw meat. And I said, well, did they tell you not to drink alcohol? And she was like, no, they didn't. And I'm like, so there's
Crazy.
so much misunderstanding out there, but there's no safe amount of alcohol or timing in a pregnancy or anything. And while it is 1 in 20 children in the United States who's been prenatally exposed in this population of kids in child welfare and foster and adoptive placements, it's much higher,
Yeah.
and it's still not diagnosed. So it's parents struggle. So I'll stop sounding like a commercial, but we need the training and the support. And, I know I work really hard to provide that, but it's very frustrating, and parents often, and our kids can struggle because of it. So thank you for sharing about, your experience with that so far. And I'd love to connect after you've
Yeah, for
been to
sure.
Rochester there. So I'm always interested. Now, are you guys still fostering, or have you stopped that?
We are, I mean, we're right now, we told him we want to wait a little bit, just to kind of get grounded again, after this big goodbye, and just help my children settle from that. And we might, I mean, yeah, it takes a toll. Foster care is beautiful and it is very hard, and especially when you do have children with a lot of needs, you want to help them as much as you can, and it's a full-time job if you're doing if you're doing that. And then if you have more kids that need more. And so I feel like we're not saying no. My husband's getting his medical done right now, to renew. But we will probably stick with maybe respite for a little while, or like emergency placements until they find somewhere. I mean, they called me a month ago. I had 5 kids in my home. My home's not that big. Like, they knew we were full, and they asked me to take a 2-year-old and a baby. And I couldn't, I had to say no. And I hate saying no. It's so hard for me. But there's just such a need. There's such a need, probably everywhere. But I know in our county, I mean, there's a lot and not enough homes. So that was one of my goals of doing home finding, is like just finding more people and sharing about it, and also supporting foster parents, because it's such hard work. And I mean, it's not because, yeah, it's just, if you're doing it well, it takes so much intentionality. It can be very exhausting. And there's a lot of advocating to do. There's a lot of uncertainty, which is hard on our nervous systems. There's just so many layers. And my goal now and my desire is to help and support foster families, especially moms, just from knowing what I've gone through with my own experience and my own struggles. I really want to support moms so they can do this well, and sustain it, and maybe serve and support more kids instead of burning out.
Sandra Flach, host of the Adoption and Foster Care Journey podcast, and FASD educator Debbie Raymond, invite you to join Hope for the FASD Journey, a virtual support community for parents and caregivers raising individuals with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, diagnosed or not. This faith-based support community meets online 3 times each month, features special VIP guests, and a private Facebook group for members only, which includes Soul Care Saturday video devotionals led by Sandra and Deb. Both Sandra and Deb are adoptive moms raising kids with FASD and facilitators of the Facets neurobehavioral model. For details and to register, visit justicefororphansny.org/hope-community. That's justicefororphansny.org/hope-community.
So Abby, I read in your bio, you are an integrative somatic trauma therapist. Could you explain what that is?
So I'm in training right now. So I'm not technically certified yet. It's a certification that I'm doing. I have a background in social work, master's in social work. Since I moved here from Colorado, I got my master's in Colorado, and I've been doing continued education in more somatic work because from my experience and just my research and um, knowing that our trauma and our grief and our stress lives in our body. And so I've done a lot of years of different kind of like going to therapy, myself. I have a somatic therapist that I go to now that's really helped me regulate my nervous system because there was a time after, having all these children in my home and there was a lot of dysregulation going on, I was getting affected by it because that's what happens with nervous systems. And so I've been learning so much. I've been noticing a change of how I react and respond. And so I'm just doing further training on that of how to help incorporate the body in our healing, in our grounding and getting back to, a state of, it's not about being calm all the time, that's not reality, but a state of groundedness so that we can operate with intention instead of reaction. And I also have had many years as a yoga teacher. I was doing a trauma-informed yoga therapy training as well. So just trying to integrate all of these body-based practices um, with healing, like on a nervous system level.
Yeah, that's so important. And for our listeners who might not really understand what somatic means, somatic trauma, could you just give a little definition?
It's body based. It's how it's incorporating the body into the healing work that you're doing. So instead, it's not talk therapy is really important and it can be very healing. But many people have probably heard of the book The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van der Kolk. He's amazing teacher, psychologist, writer. He did a study many years ago, and I feel like he was kind of one of the first to bring this to light in the world of therapy, but um, about incorporating body-based movement practices, yoga in particular, he used for this one study, but he was working with veterans who had significant trauma. And one group was doing talk therapy, and one group was doing talk therapy plus yoga. And the group that was doing the body-based practices had such better outcomes of the reduced symptoms of trauma because trauma lives in the body. Like our body, it's a nervous system response. It's something that we're not thinking about. It's there and you can't really think your way out of it sometimes. And so incorporating the body somatic is one way to say it. It's integration, it's understanding that we're not just in the mind, like our heart is involved, our body, our soul, there's a spiritual component to us. All of those things need to be a part of the healing process.
So it's a holistic approach,
Mm-hmm.
right? Yeah, I love that. So I assume that your early traumas, your losses, when you were in Colorado with the failed adoptions and then losing your mom, is that what kind of led you on this particular journey? Are there other things?
I was really interested in it even before that. I was a yoga teacher. I loved it I think because I live a lot in my head, just I'm very much like in my head a lot, thinking about things and never stopping up there. And so the practice that I did really grounded me as a person. And so I was like, I want to share this. I want to do this with other people. And I incorporated my Christian faith into it. So I started teaching Christ-centered movement, Christ-centered yoga in Colorado Springs before this happened. All those things happened. But and I was also working with survivors of trafficking. So that was kind of and is one of my passions is to support women and girls and children in general who've who've been exploited. And so that training that I was really motivated by that to incorporate into the work I was doing to help survivors, help people who had experienced trauma. And then just practicing, like when I got here to New York, I really had to kind of face my grief because I feel like I wasn't running. I was a little bit running from it. I was trying to keep myself so busy after my mom passed away, and like I didn't slow down. I didn't have time to process it. And I needed to process it through my body. And I think I know God knew that. He moved us to the woods, like literally to a young camp in the woods in the winter. I didn't know anybody. And I spent a lot of time like just walking in the woods and praying and also moving, gentle movement, allowing myself to feel and cry and be angry and be questioning all of those things. But the body part was really important, even if it was just like hiking or walking. That's kind of one way I process a lot. And nature, just being in creation is so healing. And so that kind of started just my desire to, because it was so important to me and it helped me so much to offer that to other people or to guide other people into that too.
Yeah, I love that because I do being outside because you can see nature behind me. Anybody who's watching the YouTube video, you can see that. But just being outside in nature, in the woods, I love that. Walking, hiking, I love those things too. So it's very nurturing to our whole body. So love what you're doing. And you have a website, you have resources on your website. Your website is abbymortenson.com. We will put a link in the show notes, but would you share what are some of the resources that you do offer?
Yeah, I'm just getting started, kind of reintegrating into the work. I was doing a lot of work for a while through like circles, like through grief, a grief online grief course that I did. And then when we got the fifth baby, things changed. I had to slow down again and focus on being here. But now I'm writing. Writing is a really important way for me to process. So I'm writing um, and creating spaces for foster and adoptive mothers specifically to process grief and also find grounding through faith and ritual and community. I'm working on a 5-day grounding experience that people can just put their email in and I email it to them. It's very simple, kind of like mindfulness practice, teaching, and I have another one that I'm working on that's more full. There's going to be a course online that people can join, and I'm also planning a retreat right now. So I've done a lot of retreats, led a lot of retreats in the past. It's one of my favorite things to do. I just feel like being together in an intentional space, being away from the chaos of life and just having that time in a beautiful place. It's always going to be in nature. It's always going to be just where we can slow down, be nurtured by God through nature, through one another. So I'm working on a retreat specifically for foster and adoptive moms, and I'm really excited about that. I also host a in-person support group. I work with Foster the Family, and I have a support group here in the Hudson Valley. So we do that once a month, and that's been really great just to meet with other foster moms, adoptive moms, and be together, share some food, and we do a little bit of learning too, like just practical, real life teaching from Foster the Family about how to do this journey, how to do this well. So.
I was going to ask you about that because were you at Filled in Pennsylvania recently?
I didn't get to go this year. I did go last year, but this year I didn't get to go. Yeah. Were you there?
Yeah, this year was my first year. Jamie had
Okay.
invited me I did a workshop. I led a breakout session on FASD,
Oh, that's awesome.
and had an informational table there with all of our resources and stuff. So when I was reading through your website and I'm like, wait, she leads a foster the family support group. I've got to ask her about that. So I'm glad that you mentioned it because I wanted to ask you. And so anybody who may be listening down in the Hudson Valley and who may not know about your group, how would they get involved in your monthly foster the family support group?
So they can go to my website. There's a page on my website for foster adoptive moms, and you can put your email in. I can email the info. We also have a Facebook page. I should have written that down. I think it's like Foster the Family Hudson Valley. But I usually post in the Facebook group, and I'm on Instagram. I try to share about it on Instagram as well, a little bit. So.
Awesome. Awesome. We'll make sure that we follow all of your pages as well so our listeners can connect with you there. I love that. So your website again is abbymortenson.com. We will include the show notes, a link in the show notes so that our listeners can find you. Super easy because it's your name. So that was easy. So Abby, you chose the verse that I opened with today, and I'll read it again for our listeners. While they were eating, Jesus took bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and gave it to his disciples, saying, "Take and eat. This is my body." So, what does Matthew 26:26 mean to you?
So this is where my tears might come out. I have a really cool story about that verse, and it's particularly important to me, like in this season. But I talked to a spiritual director and was sharing about, the upcoming, this was a week before our baby left, and was sharing about that and just the complexity of it, that reunification is beautiful and it can be the right thing, and it's also can be heartbreaking. Um, and just what foster care is like, like holding your hands open to receive and also to give. So she said something when we were talking. She said it really sounds like a Eucharistic movement. Like
Mhm.
foster parenting is that you bless, you get this blessing, you open your hands to receive this blessing. And through that time, like there is a breaking, especially when you do say goodbye. And you're giving so much to that child. You're giving that child back into the world or back to their family or whatever it may be. So she talked about that. And then the day before our baby left, we I wanted to do something significant, like just meaningful, to mark this important change and to like mark our time together. So I got a big canvas and paint, and he and I went on the porch and just painted together. And I just put all the paints out and the paintbrushes and let him just do what he wanted to on the canvas. And it's back here. It's kind of crooked on my wall, but it's hanging up there is the paint.
Oh, how precious.
Yeah, it's
Oh,
really beautiful.
yeah.
And the next day, I was processing, trying to write a little bit the day he left. And I was like, oh, I want to write the date on the back of the canvas. So I went to write the date, and it was 2/26/26.
Oh.
And I was like, okay, what's this mean? Like, I felt like it was a significant number when I wrote it down. So I looked it up, like, what are some Bible verses that have 26 in it? And that one came up,
Mm.
Matthew 26:26. And yeah, I just felt like it was a beautiful, like, message to me. A beautiful reminder that God knows, like, he knew the date that I would have my last day with him. He knows this whole plan. And like he reiterated it through someone else before it even happened. It was just like a moment of being seen and held. And also just that beautiful picture of, like Jesus called us into this, and he modeled it for us. And not easy, but it is important. Um, and we just, it's like taking that posture of open hands. And that's what I like. And my Substack is called With Open Hands, and it's like a symbol of um how do you live with grief and joy. How do you give away and keep your heart and your hands open to receive and to keep going. So I'm still kind of processing all of it and what it means, and I just think it's really significant to me right now, and hopefully to other foster parents too.
Because so many listening are familiar with that journey, right? Of losing and having those open hands and having um, our precious ones go, be reunified, which can be a wonderful thing, really. And then, we know it's a broken system and sometimes it's not wonderful. And there's just so much to hold, right? So thank you for sharing, that part of your story and your pain, because I know that there's a lot of moms listening that are nodding and probably crying and just can identify, and not everybody that we encounter gets it,
Yeah.
they don't get it. And so I know that you are encouraging our listeners. And that was going to be my last question. My wrap-up question I always ask is, our listeners are primarily foster and adoptive parents, especially moms like us. So, Abby, if you would offer some words of encouragement for our
Mhm.
listeners who are on this journey, and it's lonely, it's isolating, it's hard, it's painful, it's filled with loss and grief, but it's also filled with hope and joy. But any words of encouragement you could offer our listeners, we'd love that.
Yeah. I I I have a poem that I would love to read, because that's kind of how I just feel like God meets me so much through words, and other people's writings. And um, I do want to say that you're doing a beautiful thing, and it doesn't mean it's not going to be painful. And that God sees what you're doing, and God honors this, this challenging journey that we've stepped into. And he can hold this grief with us if we're experiencing grief in that. But this, I'm going to try to read it without crying. But Jan Richardson is someone I love to read, and this is a blessing. It's called "And the Table Will Be Wide." And the table. Okay, I'm going to try
Take your
to
time.
be strong. Anyone who knows me knows I cry like very easily. So, especially when I'm in a tender place, but, and the table will be wide, and the welcome will be wide, and the arms will open wide to gather us in, and our hearts will open wide to receive. And we will come as children who trust there is enough, and we will come unhindered and free, and our aching will be met with bread, and our sorrow will be met with wine, and we will open our hands to the feast without shame, and we will turn toward each other without fear, and we will give up our appetite for despair, and we will taste and know delight, and we will become bread for a hungry world, and we will become drink for those who thirst, and the blessed will become the blessing, and everywhere will be the feast.
That is beautiful. Beautiful. We'll put a link to the poem in our show notes because I would love to read that
Yeah, you
again.
might need to read it
Again.
not someone who's crying through
Yeah. No, that just added an element of beauty, really. Your transparent, raw emotion. And again, our audience is us. And I'm sure there's tears at the same time out there because so many can identify with your journey. And you express it beautifully. And
Thank
just
you.
just so grateful that, for all that you're doing for foster and adoptive moms and for, your family and your ministry. And I'm just so grateful to get to know you and to have you on the show today. So thank you so much for being with us.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thanks for all the work you're doing too to connect us.
Thank you. And thank you for tuning in to the Adoption and Foster Care Journey. I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Abby. She is precious, and I hope that you will check out her resources and her website at abbymortenson.com. We will put a link in the show notes, of course, for you to just check out. She's even got beautiful photography. She's a photographer. We didn't even get to that part of the conversation, but check it out. In addition to inspiring and encouraging you through this podcast, I should say, we have resources to equip you for your unique parenting journey. I hope you will check out our Hope for the FASD Journey online support community, as well as our online and in-person FASD training and workshops, breakout sessions, and parent coaching. I do one-on-one parent coaching online. If you're interested in more of a personalized approach, everything is available. You can learn more at justicefororphansny.org. Just click AFCJ, or you'll see it says Adoption and Foster Care Journey. Link in the show notes. As always, please subscribe and follow this podcast and let your fellow fostering and adopting friends know about it so that they can access this free resource as well. And if you like to watch your podcast, you can check out our YouTube channel. It is the Justice for Orphans YouTube channel, and all of the video versions of this podcast are on our YouTube channel. So you can check it out there. Like and follow us, subscribe, leave a review. All of the things always help any podcast that you listen to be able to reach a greater audience, so that we hope that you will do that for us as well. Again, I'm so grateful that you spent your valuable time with me today. I am thrilled to have you along for the journey.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Adoption and Foster Care Journey podcast, brought to you by Justice for Orphans. We hope you were encouraged today. Please be sure to subscribe to this podcast and leave a review, and share it with your fellow foster and adoptive parent friends so they can be encouraged too. Be sure to find and follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Justice for Orphans, and check out our website for vital resources at justicefororphansny.org.